Welcome to the Wisdom Circle. To subscribe or follow us on your favorite podcast platforms, please visit us at www.thewisdomcircle.com.
Welcome to the Wisdom Circle. I am here today. I'm Ray Warren, co-founder of the Wisdom Circle. My friend Tony Ponturo had the idea. I said, yeah, sounds good to me. So he's co-founder one. I guess I'm co-founder two. Tony, how are you today?
I'm good. Looking forward to our guests. We've both known him for a long time, and
yes,
there's a lot to talk about. The sports scene keeps changing, the media scene keeps changing, and the globalization of communication in the world keeps changing. So there's a lot to talk about.
And we have a guy who's right in the middle of it. Ray Katz. Welcome, Ray Katz, to our podcast. Ray is the president of Media and Business Intelligence at CSMG. He's an adjunct professor at Manhattanville University. He's been a colleague / friend of mine since joining 2004 OMD. We were starting up a marketing agency that tied into the sports buying. We called it Optimum Sports. We had Tom McGovern on the buy side, Ray on the client services acquisition. I mean, he just did an amazing job building that business. And so full credit where credit is due. And Tony, as we mentioned in our pre-chat, that Tony and Ray go back to Leverage Agency, and both being so smart, they're professors. So Tony met him at NYU and Columbia. Ray's still doing that. And that's, I think, a solid introduction of a guy who works on, every part of the sports landscape, specific maybe focus on college, but I'll let you tell that story. And there'll be no shortage of conversation. So Tony, I'm going to throw it back to you, and you can, take the lead on something you might want to talk about, and we'll ham and egg it as always.
Yeah, Ray, I was even looking back this morning at your full background because, we all meet each other at some point in our careers. And I know with a lot of our younger listeners, they sometimes think it's like the GPS map. Their career should be like turn left, go right. And I think we know, having lived it, that it's a very, sort of fluid kind of thing. And I was surprised, which would lead me into you giving a little bit of your background and sort of your voice, that you spent some time, and I think maybe even started at the NFL, which I had forgotten. So with that sort of as a setup, sort of give people an idea of how does someone start at a big organization, help build and innovate a new element of a big agency, and then 12 years ago, start your own company.
Well, thanks, Tony. It's been an incredible ride. I've met amazing people. Sort of the list is topped by the two of you, and I'm not just saying that because I'm on the show, but I'm really privileged to be here today. NFL was really my first job in what I call the global sports industry, in a major property. I actually got out of Penn and Wharton Business School and started my career in advertising. Kind of got lost on the way to Wall Street because I loved marketing. Professor David Reebstein, who started our marketing class in a way that you could not do so in business school today. He asked students if they could tell the difference between 3 beers. Particularly interesting to you, Tony, and it turned out they couldn't. And so I am premium sort of mass market and then lower end market. And it just turned me on to the power of marketing. And I went to Young and Rubicam, the top agency at that time. Had some great account experiences, worked for another Tony Pace there, another lifelong friend. Great guy. And got into sports because I got onto the Adidas account, which is a whole story in itself. And that really launched my career in sports, met people at Madison Square Garden, worked there, etc. So it's, and then from there, I went to the Walt Disney Company and then to the NFL. And it's been an amazing ride since then, 100% in the sports industry.
And you're seeing a lot of things, I always laugh. I don't know if I ever talked about it on our podcast, but my senior paper went to Villanova for economics was sports should be legalized. There should be legalized gambling in sports. So think how far ahead that was. I think my professor looked at me like I had three heads. But we all lived through, and sometimes it sounds like, we walked to school with bare feet, but we walked through, three television networks that became satellite TV. God rest his soul, Ted Turner, who I think we all
We should pay
interfaced
homage.
with
Ted, thanks for bringing it up.
in his day. Had the vision, then the internet explosion, and then AI, and then so I guess where I'm going is, and you're now seeing it with the work you do, is to sort of not put words in your mouth, but encourage people to say this thing will continually evolve and technology will. But then there's also things, as you're dealing with colleges and sponsors, there's certain things that stay the same. How do you sell a property? What's the value of the property? So I know I gave you about 6 questions all in one there, but I'll let you sort of, opine on those sort of thoughts, and then I'll throw it back to Ray.
Sure. Again, I'll try to give precise answers. What stayed the same is the need for properties to engage their customers. And to really do that, you have to have a strong position, and brands need to engage their customers, and properties done right can be the conduit to help that happen by tapping into passion of a fan base and converting that passion into passion for a consumer. That's never going to change. What has changed is there's more clutter, there's more noise. People are getting a lot more messages than they have gotten. And I think it's very easy for people to say, well, nobody ever got fired for buying more ESPN. Nobody ever got fired for putting their conference content on ESPN Plus. And ESPN's amazing, and it's still terrific. It's changed a lot. It's only in 45% of TV households. So I think it's increasingly important to have critical thinking, understand your objectives, build good strategies, look at the strategic options, and then employ the right tactics. And there are a lot more ways to do that. Social media is still relatively new in the full use of social media. Everybody talks about, well, with streaming, television's dead, radio's dead. To me, nothing could be further from the truth. Radio maybe evolved to audio. So I think the delivery mechanisms and the means of engagement have changed, but the need to have marketing discipline, brand positioning, understand your competition, and how, when, and where you're going to try to beat them with the resources you have, I don't think that's changed at all.
That's great. Great.
No, that's all true. I was watching ESPN's telecast of the Knicks game a couple of nights ago. It was almost unwatchable. I think they were trying to cram commercials before the last 2 minutes of the game. There would be one play. Jalen Brunson takes it down court, drops a bucket, break. They take it down the other side, they miss, break. And I don't remember any of the spots. I was angry. I was waiting. And so there's this whole balance that, I know they have to make money with 45% of the country, but it just seemed and I want to get back to Tony thinking that sports gambling is a good idea, because that could be another show, just you and me going at it, if you thought it was a good idea. But what are the relevant places now? Where would you, if you were, McDonald's, shared client, what would you do? I mean, they're buying a lot of Turner, because I'm sitting home sometimes in the afternoon watching. Where would you put your money? And how do you help clients figure out, of all these 47,000 places to go, how do you keep that passion connection with your consumer?
Well, it's a challenge, and I'm mostly sell side at this point in time, although we are in a couple of agency of record discussions. But I feel like consumers don't absorb, to your point, 150 commercials that might run during the course of a 3-hour game. It seems like, even if it's really closer to 100 or 90. And I feel like just buying more commercials isn't the answer. I think all the things that, Tony, you did running AB and all their efforts in terms of having ownership positions, dominant positions, exclusivity in the Super Bowl, I think that's more important. And McDonald's,
is it available? Can you do
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Can you,
Well,
will
it's
they
not
sell you that?
available. It's really not available in the biggest properties anymore because of all these challenges and how much money they have to make from beer or from auto specifically or from financial services. So sometimes it's like, who's your real audience? Where's your real growth coming from? Who is it coming from? Where is it coming from? What demographic group? Who's going to go to McDonald's anyway? I mean, I always use the example like about Yale basketball because I'm primarily living in Connecticut and the place is half empty and they have until Fran McCaffrey's arrival at Penn the best program in the Ivy League, and it's half empty. And I ask people, well, did you have a good time when I bring them? Or I just ask random people at halftime, yeah, this is awesome. Well, what'd you think of the price? It was great. What'd you think of the experience? It's great. When's the last time you went? 3 years ago. Well, to me, that's the power of marketing,
Good.
is
Yeah.
understanding that people that come, what are we going to do to now engage them further? And then
Right.
there are going to be your hardcore alums that are coming anyway, right? So
Right. So that's probably
it's
half of the third.
yeah, and it's not just simple demographics. As Tony Pace used to say, my customer is anybody with a wallet and a mouth. So why are you coming to me with 18 to 49? And I didn't magically stop eating Subway when I turned 50. So I just think the critical thinking has deteriorated, the discipline has deteriorated, and one of the things I blame for it is how agencies have split up. When I was in the agency business twice at Young and Rubicam and the Lord Group, and then actually at Source Communications, the account person was the account lead and integrated everything to make sure the message made sense along with the medium. And that doesn't really happen anymore. I found myself at Ray at All-Star Game hoping that the State Farm messaging matched the activation of the marketing arm, hoping that matched the creative after having done the deal and set the strategy and acquired the assets. So I was like, this is crazy. This doesn't work.
Yeah. That I think is exactly, I actually think it all comes down to word of mouth right now. The brands that do best are the brands about which the best stories are told, not the brands that tell the best stories. That was great when we were shooting Fish in a Barrel. Tell a good story. They're all there. You get them, but they're not in the barrel anymore. So you got to have other people telling other people how great this is. Tony, what are your thoughts? If you were at AB right now, what changes?
I was actually, as I chair this Echelon agency, I was talking to, I every week talk to 2 or 3 of the young people and sort of a 30-minute, sort of teaching thing just to share. And one of the things that's big on everyone's mind is social media. And so what I said to them is, yes, social media is very important, but also, and Ray, you hit on it, Ray Katz, you hit on it, which is start with what is your target? Who's your consumer you're trying to connect with? And to the Subway example, which is it could be the whole adult population, or is it narrow? But you have to be careful you're not alienated. And on this broad podcast, we've beat up on the Bud Light situation enough, but that's a classic example where someone's saying we're being young and hip, so we're going to target this particular social media element, not thinking how it was going to alienate all their consumers 40 and above. So it's a real balance. And I think what I'm seeing on the agency side, or just in the industry side, is there's a lot going on. There's a lot of money being spent. There's a lot of options. And you wonder how thorough the strategic process is to actually spend the money the right way. Because, ultimately it is connecting, to the consumer. And to your point of your professor saying, if you put 3 or 4 beers in front of any consumer and say, is that Bud Light, is that Coors Light, is that Miller Lite, is that Budweiser, they probably wouldn't get it right. So the reason they're drinking it is because how they have been talked to or how the image has been projected, so that it gives them some sense of, we used to use a term at AB, which is give the consumer permission to enjoy your product. So, and particularly a product that's so social and so out there. So, so anyway, it's, and getting to the selling side, Ray, is I assume when you have an asset, the probably, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, one of the things you do when you go to an advertiser is understanding not only, okay, this is Geico or State Farm or Budweiser or whatever, but you understand first what are they trying to achieve as a marketer with their brands, and how do you take your asset and marry that strategy together?
100%. I mean, I always start with kind of what keeps you up at night. If you could change one thing about the results and you were going to get 15% more revenue, where would that come from? And then kind of work my way through the questions. And I just find a good salesperson, and I'm an okay salesperson. I'm a better salesperson in marketing services, but you have to really understand the problems, the frustrations. You have to do a mental SWOT analysis, and then really understand the 4 Ps and the 6 Ws and all that good stuff to really have discipline. And I think that's become a little bit of a lost art, because sometimes the client hasn't even thought of all that. And when they think of it, it makes it kind of clear what they need to do. It boggles my mind sometimes when I'll see like Amica Insurance, and they're trying to advertise and market on mass events, high level events, where they're the 8th or 9th biggest spender in the insurance category. And when we were Optimum Sports, I figured out pretty quickly the average person through research got 2.8 average quotes. So my goal is to be in the top 2. I'm not going to beat Geico. They spent 3 times as much money, at least they did at that point in time. So what am I going to do to be in the top 2, and where am I going to be to make sure I'm in the top 2? If I'm a challenger brand, where can I be in the top 2 against 10% of the audience versus being in the top 9 and 80% of the audience?
Well, the other thing I always found interesting was advertisers who advertise where they don't have distribution.
Exactly.
Sonic is a perfect example. They started buying ESPN because somebody watched it, but you couldn't find a Sonic in New York 10 years ago. And so, I think Amica was the same way. They were a Northeast insurance company, started up. They're a big sponsor of the Celtics when I was at Comcast Sports. And I don't even know if they're national now, but I've seen them, in places I feel like I shouldn't be seeing them. So I think you're right. I think that, I don't know how many actual meetings a buyer could take in a day, but I know that there are 4,000 people who might want to have a meeting in a day. So it's got to be a mess and a half. And I think that's, to your guys' points, it's on the client to know. I like that term, Tony, about giving them permission to use the brand. I mean, that's a nice positioning statement. And that would put some discipline around it, even though you don't have time. I mean, then I guess we could talk about how AI can help that, or does it hurt it? I had an idea for a TV show the other day, which it's going to be a big hit, so I can't talk about it here. But I just said, give me a synopsis of a show about blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And it came back with the most amazing in 27 seconds. And then I said, well, who are you putting that show? And it gave me the people that would target it. It was just astounding the amount of time it took. It was about 10 seconds. And, my son's in the business, so I think we all have to think about production and AI and intrusion, and everybody who's water stamping their names and trademarking themselves. Little meander there, but where is AI fitting into some of the things? I know we want to talk about NIL and esports and and I want to talk about gambling. Yeah. But let's talk about AI for a second. Tony, should throw it to you so you get a chance to.
Well, to lead into the NIL, I'll ask Ray, and I'm sure you saw the headline, and maybe you both have, that where Prime and so is giving Duke money, so it's like a different form of NIL. So we'll do 4 of your games, Duke, and for that, here's our rights fee. But it's really meant to go to the coffer of NIL, yes. Which is, and so that may be the first, but I doubt it's going to be the last. So I guess, Ray, you're so close to the collegiate sort of world. What I know we talked a little bit off air, but our listeners haven't heard this. What is your sort of vision on what is NIL and where's it going?
Well, NIL was initially designed to be name, image, and likeness, and like to think of it as almost nilly, name, image, likeness, and influence. And that's what you're supposed to be buying, the athlete's influence. And once Bryce Young received $1 million for his 27,000 social media followers, you don't have to be a media math genius to figure out that's not a name, image, and likeness buy. And it quickly has deteriorated into just pay for play. And it's really creating a huge chasm in basketball between the mid majors and the top schools that are getting $40+ million each in media rights annually as part of their deals and as part of the conference deals. So NIL really has just turned into a good way to activate a sponsorship. No different than endorsement in professionals is a good way in professional sports is a good way to activate a team or league sponsorship. But
isn't it kind of full circle where it used to be that the rich guys who went to University of Florida found a way to help somebody go to the University of Florida in a dark room at a dark club, and guy went to the Chevy deal the next day and bought a Corvette. It just seems to me like it was a way to kind of say, okay, look, we got our hands around this because we're going to help the guys who aren't the big stars. But then they did. And it just feels like a full circle moment. Is that on track?
But not everybody did it. And there wasn't a transfer portal. And if you sat out as a transfer, you would have to sit out for a year.
Right.
And so it was completely different. The biggest problem isn't necessarily the recruiting, because if you're a mid-major school, you could find a diamond in the rough that maybe grows 3 inches between high school and college like Julius Erving did. But the problem is now they just transfer out with total impunity. And literally this year, the Metro Atlantic Conference, everybody on their top 3 all-conference teams, first, second, and third team, is in the transfer portal. Every single play, and that's just ridiculous. We are very involved in media rights. We are in the process of closing deals for 2 conferences right now. We do 6 in Division I and in a couple of other great conversations. And this all comes up in terms of, because we also sell the title sponsorships and the sponsorship of these conferences, and NIL does become a good way to supplement it, because if you look at a mid-major roster, maybe College of Charleston's in the $4 million range. Mount St. Mary's University might be in the $400,000 or $500,000 range. And that's kind of what you're talking about. Duke's probably 25 to 30 million for their roster, and St. John's is whatever Mike Rapoli wants to spend, pretty much.
Well, in my opinion, which sort of umbrellas the bigger conversation here is, in my opinion, probably the worst negotiators in the world are a combination of college athletic directors and GMs at the professional league. Because, and my example is where they, and I don't want to name any names per se, but you go and offer a coach who's never been a head coach, good assistant coach. We can think of a lot of people. And it's like, here's a 5-year deal for $5 million a year, $25 million, and it's all guaranteed. So the person's never proven, and so I cynically want to say, well, if you went back to that same person and said, here's a 3-year deal with a 2-year extension, assuming you do prove out to be good, how many of those people will walk away from the deal? So we all know the colleges are paying 2 coaches and professional teams paying coaches. So, and if we could have a whole topic on agents who, think of the agents who convinced their live golfers, and we go, now here's another tangent, to go to live, because guess what? I'm getting 5% or 10% of what you're going to do. And, if it doesn't happen, we'll figure it out. You'll go back, And so it's all a money grab. And they all pretended they were growing the game of golf, which was, I did believe. But you have this underlining thing in sports called wasted money and bad negotiators and agents who help precipitate or accelerate that, and it's bad business. So, Ray,
I was going to say, you've got to imagine that an agent for the coach who was offered the 5-5 instead of the 3+2 said, yeah, but there's this other school over here that's offering
I would
us
say
5.
bye-bye, right? Because in business, you would say bye-bye, right? It's like, okay, Ray Katz, here's
That's
the
the
offer.
problem.
I don't want it. Okay, Ray Warren, do you want the offer? So no one's playing the game of hardball, and you know what?
They're
Everyone's
terrible negotiators. You said it. They're terrible.
Well,
terrible.
One of the things is that presidents are getting involved, and some coaches are circumventing the athletic directors. Again, I can't mention a couple of schools where I know that's what's taken place. And the president rightfully believes that sports is going to help them build the stature, applicant base, and everything else of universities in this time period of an enrollment cliff. And that's one of the things that we do at CSMG is help schools fight the enrollment cliff and use their games as infomercials for the school. We've done that very successfully with Stony Brook and Monmouth, just to look at 2 local examples here. And of course, we have clients all over, up and down the Eastern Seaboard and out into the Midwest through the Summit League and the Big Sky Conference we work with, and really helping those schools market themselves through sports. It's amazing. Stony Brook, for example, went up from 108 to 58 in the U.S. News and World Report rankings of national colleges, national universities. So it's sports is more important than ever.
Yeah.
Ray, what's the stuff, we're sort of like, or I'm sort of like the evening news, which is telling all the bad stuff that's going on. What's the good stuff going on? You're right in the middle of things. What are the stuff that you see as, you're saying this is really good for the industry, this is good for sports, this is good for the consumer? What are the good things?
I think what's really good is that it's become so much less expensive to produce games. So there's more and more content out there. There's more and more channels and media out there. There's no question about that. And colleges have actually gotten the ability to produce and broadcast their own football, basketball games, and every other sport. And then these students have great backgrounds that they can then take out there in the world. We used only student casters at our collegiate, the CECC event, the Commissioner's Cup, the College Esports Commissioner's Cup. We used all student casters, and one of our people that does some broadcasting, one of our executives, actually was the host. And we didn't miss a beat from last year because the students are getting so good at this. And the schools are becoming media companies. And that's enabling them to really market themselves. And it's creating, to your point, Tony, a bigger difference between the schools that are really understanding the cheese has moved and I have to change the way I do business versus, to your point, athletic directors and even commissioners. It's like they come in at 8:59 on Monday morning, and if they have their job at 5:01 on Friday night, they had a great week. But it's changing so quickly, and it's so interesting to see that there's no correlation between the big thinkers that are doing great things and everybody else. President Patrick Leahy at Monmouth is incredible. He's taken a school that was a sleepy school. They're incredibly dynamic. Last year, they broadcast over 40 sporting events on NBC Sports Philadelphia and Sportsnet New York with our help. And they're really using that to get a bigger, broader student base, better athletes. They had a guy last year that was going to be a top 5 quarterback. He got injured mid-season in the country, arguably. So it's interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Good.
When you do those deals, so let's say that Monmouth puts 40 games on, NBC Sports Philly or SNY. Do they get, because, I think we've all got college connections in one way or the other, be it professing or on a board. Do they get promos for a game, like in a Mets game or in a different,
yes.
In other words, when you talk about marketing the school, it's not just about who wants to watch Monmouth basketball on Saturday in May, but I think you're saying yes to what the real question is. They're getting promotion all over SNY or all over CS. That's just so smart.
And one of the things we do at CSMG is we actually intermediate the deal. And both
Mm-hmm.
sides, for example, SNY and Stony Brook, like what's fair if we give Stony Brook, if Stony Brook gives SNY $40,000, $50,000 of assets, well, what does SNY have to do for Stony Brook on the back end to
Right.
promote,
Yeah.
whether it's commercial
Mm-hmm.
units, tune-ins, et cetera, et cetera. And we
Right.
end up kind of being the intermediary in that every year. So
That's great.
we really, and I think the other thing we've done that's interesting is we've started to extend beyond just regional sports networks, which are still great, but they're in about, again, 40, 50% of TV households. So we were actually probably the first media advisor in college athletics that started pushing over-the-air stations for your local and regional work. And we were a very big part of the sort of Scripps revival and their ownership of stations. And give you just an example, and I think you'll both appreciate this coming from different places. We did the renegotiation for ESPN for the Big Sky, and we actually took the Montana State game off ESPN. And they said, wow, it's going to cut your rights fee by $100,000. And I'm like, that's all right. It's okay. It's cool. Because on ESPN, it's just 100,000 viewers more for 3 hours.
Right.
In the state of Montana, it's doing a 36-40 rating every year, and that drives the entire media schedule. Oh, you want 2 spots on this? Great. You have to buy all the other Montana State games. You got to buy 2 strips on local news.
I should start up Raycom Sports again. We were the over-the-air syndicator.
Very relevant. Very relevant.
Iowa stations would preempt Seinfeld to play an Iowa basketball game. I'd rather have Iowa basketball than Seinfeld in its heyday. So I hear that it's just full circle. I mean, I keep coming back to full circles because it is just the way things are, you know? Like everything is coming back, over-the-air broadcasts of sports, you know, NIL to big donors. Let's talk about esports because that's something that might not be something that can go full circle. It hasn't really gone anywhere.
Well, it's interesting. I use an analogy when people say, well, I heard, esports isn't really doing that well, so I'm not sure I want to sponsor your collegiate esports Commissioner's Cup or one of the regionals. And I always say, well, why do you think that? Well, pro esports, we sponsored that years ago and it was a disaster. We totally overpaid. And I said, look, professional esports is like the internet before 2000, and college esports is like the internet after 2000, where real value was being built. And we're building it brick by brick, and we're not coming at you and saying, these franchises went for $20 million, so your sponsorship's $500,000. And then you dig down, and it's probably $30,000 of value. We're kind of more bottom up, where we started with a few 100,000 viewers of our national championship event. And then last year, we don't have the final numbers in yet this year, but last year we got to 6 million viewers, which is pretty substantial. Now, granted, they were on for minutes and not hours, but it's been a great ride. We are seeing this as a product that we can license both to colleges, potentially even promoters domestically, and we are already working to put on Monsoon Madness in India this fall in September. And then we will have China coming on board next year, possibly Korea and Japan, Germany, Australia's all expressed interest in it. So we're seeing this as a global property, and you can compete globally in esports because everybody doesn't have to be in the same place. So it really took off during the pandemic, but I'm very enthusiastic. I think we should leave event operations to event operators and be the licensor of intellectual property across the board. It's going to make a lot more sense moving forward.
Yeah, you would be in that like an athletic director in a building trying to run the operations. So
almost acting like a PGA Tour, right? They don't own all their events. They have local promoters.
Yep. Works for them.
Hey Ray, just to switch gears a little bit. We talk a lot on the podcast about generational sort of shifts or attitudes, and maybe more importantly, being sensitive to the different generational shifts based on, someone born in 2000, which, is only 26 years old, they grew up with cell phones and all the technology stuff. And we grew into it, if you will. But what are you seeing with not to be pandering, but with the young people today, both in the classroom and with the people you interface with, as you're selling assets? What are the things that catch your eye?
Well, the first thing that catches my eye is low attention spans. And so you have to be really thoughtful how you market to these people. And you can't tell a long story, and you have to really figure out how you're going to be extremely concise and to the point and break through the enormous amount of clutter they have as they stare into their phones and miss what's going on in the real world. That's the first thing. The second thing is, in the classroom, the skills have totally deteriorated at every level of academics, without mentioning the universities I used to teach at versus the ones I teach at now. But what I will say is the top 10% that have great values and a desire to learn and respect older people and work with older people so that we all make each other better, those people are probably better, well, certainly better than me. I'm not going to say better than you all, but they were certainly better than me. And we hired one of them, and she's running business intelligence for us and has really taken the lead on building out this practice on jersey patches, where we're working now with 7 schools, just signed number 7 this morning, and about 15 more in the pipeline, everything from University of Arizona down to mid-major schools that might be in the Metro Atlantic Conference, and within the middle of that is like the Atlantic 10 and other Group of 5 schools. So, and she's exceptional. I can't imagine anyone being that good at age 25.
And I think that's the new dynamic, is that it used to take years and years to build the experience, to have gone through a lot. And now it's almost flipped, where if you're just a digital native as opposed to a digital immigrant like Tony and I are, and Ray, anybody who was born before a cell phone is an immigrant, it almost flips, where if you want to get something done, ask a 23-year-old. They'll figure it out for you. Not necessarily at the business level of making money or not, but the experience, they've been doing the experience for the last 10 years on their phones and on their computers. That's their experience, is how to use it. Whereas we had to actually come to work, sit in meetings, go on client calls, make pitches, screw it up, get it right. There must be a lot of that out there, which I guess that age gap has got to be to your point. I love the idea of short attention span. I mean, you get like, what's a presentation look like? Like 3 words? Like, buy us now.
I think the other thing in the classroom that I've seen, but it's true in business also, there's an infinite amount of information that you can put into a presentation. And, when we were in college, you had to use microfiche and things like that. So you had to be really pointed in terms of, okay, this is my hypothesis. This is what I want to end up with as my final project or paper or whatever the case may be. And I've got to thoughtfully support that. Now, and Terry Lefton guest lectures in my class all the time for the finals. And it's just like, this isn't about how many facts you can cram in. So I literally make them start with, give me the 10 to 15 bullet point story that you're going to tell. And then all the other research and everything else supports those 10 to 15 page headers. That's the only way to do it, because they can find out anything, but so what of it?
What?
That's so smart, Ray. I mean, because I was just thinking as you were talking, and some of the stuff that I've been trying to advise on is how do you make things simple? If you're doing a pitch, and you do it all the time in your people, you probably have about 10 to 15 minutes that either is going to grab that person's attention or not. So if you have, just for exaggeration, if you have a 50-page presentation, by page 15, you've lost everybody in the room. And so what's probably not taught enough, or at least underlined enough in the classroom, I'm not sure I did it at NYU or Columbia, which is, let's work a little bit on the 10-page presentation, which is going to get to your point. And if there's elaboration, if you want an appendix of 40 pages, fine. But
Right.
have a 10-page presentation that says what you want. And I think, because I think a little bit, because of all the fancy tools, and this is a baby boomer talking, people want to use the tools, right? They want to pick, but the pages start to get very heavy, that you're
Right.
going to lose your audience. So anyway,
I think it's
I'm encouraged by what you say there. I'm impressed. That's a smart way to go about it.
Why don't we tell all of our audience to try to think about doing it the same way, which is if you're doing your own presentation or, someone's presenting to you.
Even as
Try
we
to throw some
we pitch business, we pitch a new conference. If I can't tell the story in 60 seconds why you should hire us, that's a problem. And so I sort of start with, here are the people, here's the process, here are some success stories, and here are some preliminary thought starters that we have as to improving the distribution platform that your conference has. And we don't have a bias. Some companies that are doing media rights, they have a bias because they have so much talent on ESPN that if they pull the media rights away from ESPN, they have a problem with ESPN. We
Right.
have the luxury of being Switzerland because we don't represent broadcast talent.
Yeah,
It's a great place to be.
Yeah.
Great
So
place
Ray,
to
you're
be.
at your 40-minute mark. So why don't you
I
bring
was
us
just
home?
about to say that, but you beat me to it. I want to let Ray finish. So listen, I think what we try to do at the end is get a little bit of, history from our guests, which is, what advice today would you give your 25-year-old self? You talked about going to Y&R from Penn instead of Wall Street, and I found that interesting. So talk about those two things, right? When you were 25 or 3 or 1, and why advertising?
I mean, again, I was so enthralled by what advertising can do, and I just liked the people better. And I think that really weighs into the advice I do give to my 27 and 30-year-old nephews quite a bit, which is make sure you're around good people. And I really thought the people at Y&R were good people, so I bet on them, whether it was my direct boss, Tony Pace, or the person above him, Roger Kioki, or some of the management supervisors and other leaders of the agency. And I built some lifelong relationships there that ended up working out well. I also thought about, if I'm in advertising, I'll probably get exposed to a bunch of really different brands and a bunch of different media. And this will all be great background in terms of problem solving and making the next move. I always tell people it's kind of like golf, right? You're not going to get the ball in the hole on the first shot. Where do you want to put it in the fairway so that you can put it on the green so then you can get it in the hole?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, the best thing I can say is don't just jump for money. Don't keep jumping. A lot of young people keep jumping, and they're not really getting different experience because by the time they're really proficient at their job, they're gone.
Right. Yeah, turnover's quite interesting. How's turnover at CSMG? You seem like the type of leader who would keep people growing, and your company's growing, you're growing. So
I appreciate that. Means a lot coming from you gents, obviously. We have had great retention with the exception of one area, and that area is what was analytics and is now business intelligence. And really the reason is because we've become a farm system for bigger companies that can pay a lot more money.
Yeah.
And we've had interns and we've had part-time folks that get great jobs elsewhere.
Right. Yeah.
But the core of our company has stayed the same. Dan Gerard, who runs media for us, has been with us for 10 years. He was our third employee. Mike Blewett runs partnerships for us. He's been with us for 6 years. Jim Connolly has evolved into an advisor from being chief revenue officer, again, 6 years, and so on and so forth. Angela Bernard-Thomas, who runs esports, her number 2, etc. 6 years is a lifetime these days. And most of our employees are really, the growth was in 2020 when we raised significant outside funding. And most of the people have stayed since then with those couple of exceptions. And also a great esports salesperson that was hired by the biggest esports company in the world for doubled what we were paying him. So it's really just people are leaving for way, way more money, which is fine.
You can't fight that fight.
Right.
You can't fight that fight. You got to run a business. All right. We have like a couple of minutes left, and I got to go back to gambling. Sure. Tony, your college paper was the pro leagues should do legalized gambling on sports. Yeah.
Well, keep in mind 2 things. One, This is 1976.
Shucks.
I was 22 years old. So, and the world of sports was not how we know it today. But the premise
That's all
was
true. You're right.
that it's that states. It wasn't how to benefit sports. It was to benefit state revenue. So rather than taxpayer money or increasing sales tax or whatever it would be, if people were going to gamble anyway, which they did illegally, why not gain the revenue from that and put it to good use within the state, assuming the state put it to good use. I understand the downsides of gambling relative to the quality or the reputation of the game and the play and how it can potentially influence it. I get that. But the premise was a revenue generation for the states.
Yeah. No, I think that's so good. I'm glad I asked, because 50 years later, it's not that. But 50 years ago, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. I just read a story about my month as a degenerate gambler by a writer for The Atlantic who was spotted $10,000 by The Atlantic. They said, here's the way we'll keep you engaged. Anything you make over 10 grand, we split. And the story of this guy becoming addicted, literally like hiding in the kitchen while his wife's calling him to the dining room while he's placing, some bets, was just eye-opening, because it can happen to anybody once you go down that rabbit hole. So big topic, maybe a little. Ray, but we'd love to have. Yeah, give Ray one shot at it, and then we'll wrap it up.
I think there's honestly, I think there's a little too much of it. I think it was a great idea, and it is a great idea. These prop bets are very scary in terms of ways to micro influence prop bets without changing the result of games. And I think it's permeated college as well as pro. But, again, something where Mike Schreck and I, who's the co-founder and CEO, really believe isn't necessarily so good for sports. But you know what? You wake up every day and you have your health and you focus on the positive and the great people I'm working with. And, I just feel blessed.
I look at college that way, whereas I don't think college is in a very good place right now. Athletics with NIL and all that other stuff. More people are watching it than ever before.
Yep.
And more people are gambling than ever before. And maybe they know the game's fixed and God bless them all. I'm just something to do for not like I need a lot, but okay, great. Miami's playing Indiana. Let's go watch that game.
Exactly.
Well, Tony, you want to wrap up with any last thought?
Yeah, I think bringing it all together, someone just asked me recently, and I think it plays into Ray, it is still teaching and working with people out there, is that the question was, what do you tell students? So I'll tell young people about, going into the sports industry. And I said, the number one thing I would say to them is you're now going to transition from being a sports fan to a business sports executive. Because people want to get into sports because they're a sports fan, right? And they want to touch it. But now you got it. So what I used to try to do in the classroom, not to elaborate more than 30 seconds here, is put yourself in the position of a crisis or a situation, and how would you handle it? Because that ultimately is going to be what sports is, or if you're working for a team or a client or whatever. So yes, there's good parts of it. You're going to go to a game and you're going to have a few beers and you're going to entertain clients, but you're now transitioning from that fan to an executive. And I think, Ray, you showed a lot of great examples of your career and how it transitioned from your interest to becoming, a co-founder of your own business and flourishing with that. And I think your insight was great.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Appreciate being on with two luminaries like yourselves. And obviously just blessed to know both of you. So thank you for having me. It's been terrific.
Pleasure is ours, and likewise. So good luck going forward, and continue to navigate through the madness. And, we will talk again soon.
We'll be in touch. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.